Why would you give up everything you know and are comfortable with to go live in a foreign country for a year with a completely different culture when you're only 17? How are you going to survive in a country where you don't even speak the language? How are you going to figure out a place where everything is completely different? I get these questions a lot. Maybe it's not always worded quite so harshly, but a lot of people think you're pretty crazy for doing an exchange year in high school. For the past year, I have been doing an exchange in Brazil for my last year of high school. I am doing my exchange with Rotary International. Rotary has short and long-term exchange programs. 2 summers ago, I did a short-term exchange in Loja, Ecuador for 1 month, and I absolutely loved it. I honestly wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. From the french fries in a cup to the fact that I couldn't even walk up a hill because of the elevation difference, 10,000 feet. I had a fantastic time. So I decided to do another exchange, and this time for a full year. I chose Brazil because I loved Ecuador and South America, but I still wanted something different. And I got something very different. In the U.S., I feel like all we know about Brazil is Rio de Janeiro, samba, and football. But I live in Oswaldo Cruz, a small town in the southern interior of Brazil, in the far western part of the state of São Paulo. Not the city, the state. My town is very small, only around 30,000 people. Charlottesville is around 45,000 people, to put that in perspective. And Oswaldo Cruz feels even smaller than that because there's not much to do. There's no cinema, no shopping, or anything like that. But don't get me wrong, I love it. A lot. Just last Sunday, I went to a football game in my town. It was my town's team from Oswaldo Cruz called Azulão versus a team from another nearby city called Assis. It was fantastic. The people in the stand were shouting at everybody. The other team, the referees, even our own team from Oswaldo Cruz. It was just so resilient and it was awesome. I love the people here so much and I'll be really sad when I come home in 2.5 months. Because I didn't want to repeat a year because of my exchange, I'm still doing 3 classes here in Brazil through the internet. 2 of them, government and college counseling, are very easy to do through the internet. But for senior thesis, I had to be a little more creative, especially with the project. I had 2 personal needs for my project. The first is that it would have to be in an online format so that I would actually be able to turn it in through the internet. The second is that I wanted a project that wouldn't disrupt with my daily life here in Brazil. I wanted something that I would be able to easily incorporate into a daily or weekly routine. And like this, I thought of photography. I had already had experience with shooting in a foreign country from when I went to Mexico DF, the capital of Mexico, last December with my family for 2 weeks. I would be able to shoot as part of a daily routine, and it wouldn't take too much time out of my life in a foreign country, especially because I would already be taking photos on my own for my own enjoyment. The next problem I had was how to display my photography online. And rather than just creating a gallery or portfolio of photos, I chose to create a blog and write about my photographs, than just displaying them with a simple caption. There were 4 main parts or topics to my senior thesis project. The first was designing the blog, which was made mostly of finding a website platform that would work well aesthetically with the photography-based project. The second was creating the blog post. There are 4 steps to making the post for me. The first is shooting the photographs, and then editing the photos, then writing the blog post, and finally translating the post into Portuguese. The next part of my project was my photographic style and aesthetic, which has changed a lot over the years. I started out shooting mostly traditional street photography in black and white, but around December my style evolved into more cinematic street photography, which is street photography in the style of film cinematography. And then around April, my style changed once more into travel photography, where I chose to shoot more places and objects rather than people. The last part of my project were my interviews. I interviewed 2 Brazilian street photographers, who were very helpful both in providing insight just on street photography in general, but also what it's like being a street photographer in Brazil. These 4 parts, interviews, style, creating blog posts, and the design make up my project. The first step in my senior thesis project was designing the blog and choosing a platform. I chose to use a WordPress website for several reasons. The first is that a collective senior thesis blog was on WordPress as well, which would make connecting all of my work easier. The second is that it was a free platform. last reason is that WordPress has website templates, and I decided early on in my project that I would rather spend my time learning more about photography and photo editing rather than using my time learning coding for a website. My website URL is Thelma Louise, which always sparks a lot of questions. Here's the explanation. Thelma and Louise is a very good movie directed by the acclaimed Ridley Scott starring Brad Pitt, which, so long as you enjoy the dead body, is a fun travel movie about a road trip to Mexico. Because I was going to be traveling, and my name sounds like Louise, I chose Thelma and Louise. My first attempt at designing a website wasn't very good. It showed more words than pictures, and wasn't very aesthetically pleasing to look at. New blog design is much better. It shows the recent blog posts with a photo for each post. The 3 blog posts here are the Show Warrior, the first Monday in March, and 55 Days of Summer. The Show Warrior is about a rock show in my town. The first Monday in March was about Carnival, which is a giant party in late February and early March in Brazil. And 55 Days of Summer is about a trip to the beach in southern Brazil with my second post family. Creating these blog posts each take a lot of work. There are 4 main steps to making each post. The first is shooting, which is taking the photos and planning photo shoots. The second step is editing, which is selecting which photos to use and editing them using GIMP. The third step is writing the blog post and figuring out how to connect my stories and anecdotes to my photos. The last step is translating my blog post into Portuguese. The first part, shooting, can be the longest part of making a blog post, depending on where and what I'm shooting. My photo shoots can be anywhere from 30 minutes to a whole day, depending on the subject. In the beginning of the year, I used to bring my camera with me to school, and I shot as I walked home from school, which was usually around a 30-minute shoot. I try to do these shoots once a week if possible, more. But when I'm traveling, I bring my camera with me for the whole day to shoot. And so these photo shoots take me for the whole day, multiple days in a row. I took a trip with Rotary to travel Brazil to places like the Amazon, the capital Brasilia, and the Northeast. And I was shooting every day, all day for 15 days straight. I had well over 1,000 photos by the end of the trip. I also try to rent in my city, sometimes like street markets or concerts. And these photo shoots are usually around 2 to 3 hours, depending on the event. I have a fair amount of trouble with my photo shoots, mainly because of my camera. My camera is large and relatively expensive. It's not that important to carry around. I can count on one hand the number of people in my town who also own a DSLR camera. The other problem is that in my town is very small, and I eventually just ran out of inspiration and desire to shoot here. I sort of feel like I've seen it all and shot in every interesting place already. This is why most of my blog posts towards the end of the year are from trips I did Rotary, Europe, and my host family. Shooting street photography can be very challenging, because sometimes we only have a few seconds to take a picture. There are a lot of settings on the camera that need to be decided in those. The main use for the camera is adjusting the light. As a photographer, you decide composition, subject, but the camera controls the light. Shooting in many photos, there are 3 parts to deciding the amount of light to photograph. The first is aperture. Aperture is the depth of field, or how much of the photograph is in focus. A smaller aperture means less of the photo is in focus, but there means light. While a larger aperture means more of the photo is in focus, there is less light. The second part of light intake is the shutter stop. The shutter stop is how fast the camera shutters fires. A quicker shutter stop means that the photo will be clearer, but there will be less light. While a slower shutter stop means more light, but a blurrier photo. And the last part of light control is the ISO. ISO is the photo quality. A lower ISO means that the photo quality will be better, but the photo will be good. The higher ISO means photo quality, more light. In the daylight, I can shoot at 100 ISO, but in the night, I might use an ISO of up to 100 if I'm not using any sort of light source from my camera like the flash. Besides light, the camera also has 2 light functions. The first is focus. Automatic focus has a tendency to focus on the wrong parts of the photo. The last function is the light balance, which I change depending on where I'm shooting and the light quality. For example, I might need a different light setting with stainless shade versus in the sun, or even under an incandescent light bulb versus an LED lit bulb. Managing all of these settings can be very hard, and I've ruined a lot of photos because my light balance is off, and the photo ends up too dark or light. Shooting photos provided a lot of challenge, but not as much as editing. Editing was the hardest and most boring part, and the step that took the longest to get a handle on. The first part of editing is selecting which photos to use. Depending on the shoot, I can have from 200 to 2,000 photos. Usually, for every 100 photos I take, there are normally 2 or 3 that are good enough to use. Sometimes more or less, depending on the subject and how well I was shooting that day. If the subject is more interesting, then the photos are usually better. After I pick out the usable photos, then I usually edit it down once more to the best and decide on how many photos I'm going to include in a post. Normally, I have around 20 photos in one post. To edit my photos, I use GIMP, which is a program like Photoshop. Editing one photo usually takes between 10 to 20 minutes and is the longest part of making a post after shooting. After the photos are edited, I also have to upload them to my website, which can take a frustratingly long time due to my internet. Edit my photos, I upload them to GIMP, and then split them into layers. Layers are like copies of the original photos that you used to edit, so you don't damage the original image and can undo and erase work very easily and very selectively. I make one layer for every main edit I do. The first editing process I do is curves. Curves shows the amount of light and dark in the photo, both overall and with respect to each color, red, blue, and green. The straight X line that runs through the middle of the graph is used for adjusting the amount of light in each photo. In the light and darkness curve, I normally change it to make a slight S curve, which basically just increases the contrast in the photo, lightening the blacks and darkening effects. Sometimes, to wash out a photo, I'll do that in reverse, by creating a reverse S curve, which lightens the dark and darkens the light and decreases the contrast. The color curves are a little bit different. They control the amount of color in the photo. By moving the X line above the axis, we add more of that color, for example red. By moving the line below the axis, we add more of that contrasting color, which in the case of red is cyan. The normal edits I do is to increase the greens and blues and the shadows. This is because the midtones in a photo are usually skin tone, and warmer colors, and are the opposite from blue and green in the color red, with improved contrast and more visually interesting photo. The second main step of editing is dodging and burning. This lightens or darkens a specific area of the photograph. It's really good for smoothing out an under or overexposed photo, which is a photo with too much or too little light. It's also good for if the subject is too dark and clear enough. The final step I do in editing is adjusting a color's lightness and saturation individually. In this step, I adjust the saturation. Usually, I'll add more saturation to the color of the subject to make it proper. I also adjust the lightness of the color group. For example, the darkest color photos is the trees, which are green, and I can make it even darker and poppier, increasing the lightness of the color green in the photo. Also, by using layer mask, you can pick out specific areas of the photo to affect, so that you're changing the lightness of the color green in only a specific area. These 3 steps can take a very long time, but editing can really enhance an image. The next step is writing the word in the blog post. I try to tie this into the photographs as much as possible, but it can be hard. I have a lot of great stories and funny things I've noticed about Brazil. I often don't have photos of the stories I want to tell. For example, when I went to the beach for a week, while I was there, I saw all these pirates dressed up as some pirate fishing. But I didn't have any photos of them to put in the blog, unfortunately. To help me write better, I also did some travel writing by reading storybooks like The Turkey Loved Apples by Matt Brooks, Into the Wild by John Krakauer, and pretty much anything by Bill Bryson. But to be honest, A Short History of Nearly Everything is not his best book. Living on a Small Island is much better, especially if you've been to England and have an idea of the culture. These authors help me learn how to write about a new place and culture while keeping it interesting. The last step in a blog post is translating it. I knew from the start I wanted to publish my blog with English and Portuguese for 2 reasons. The first was that at the beginning, writing in Portuguese was a good way to learn and practice English, especially the grammar. The second is that I now have lots of Brazilian friends who don't speak English or Portuguese, and I want them to be able to understand my blog as well. Translating the post used to take me so long, around 30 to 40 minutes just to translate, and now it's the easiest and quickest type. I also used to translate posts from English to Portuguese, but now I translate from Portuguese to English but it's actually easier than the subject input. I also just used to translate what I said in English word for word Portuguese, but now I deviate in what I say in each language with the cultural differences. For example, quando eu estou falando com brasileiros, eu não tenho que explicar o significado de samba porque já sabem mais. But when I'm talking to Americans, I have to explain what samba is and its cultural significance. Or I never need to explain that to a Brazilian. Besides translating the post, I also proofread it and check all of my photos and captions before I publish the note. The next part of my senior thesis subject was how my style as a photographer has changed and what kind of photographs I take. As a photographer, my photographs have always been candid. I absolutely hate quizzing people for pictures and manipulating subjects. My photographs have also always been inspired by street photography. Street photography is shooting candid photos of random people in public places, trying to show and find emotions in them. I like to show relationships between people, environments, and people and others. My influences for my photographs come both from photographers followers such as Gilman, Ronnie Holm, and also from the places I go to. I have been lucky to travel so much, and I like finding my inspiration in new places, people, and culture. My style when I started shooting was originally pure and basic street photography. This was at the beginning of the year, when I was still writing my paper, and so the photographers I was writing about, like Eugene Atkin and Joe Mayotte, influenced photographs. My photographs from this period of the year are often in black and white, while currently practically all of my photographs are in color. I shot in black and white because that's the traditional street photography aesthetic, but also because I learned from photography source, with development printing, and most of my film photographs are in black and white, and my film history affected my digital photography as well. The second phase I went through was cinematic street photography. Cinematic street photography is street photography that is edited to look like a screenshot of a movie. This is done by subject matter and by cropping the photo to the normal 2 by 2.5 ratio of the movie, and then adding black bars to the top and bottom of the photograph to make it fit the 16:9 ratio. This creates the illusion of the photograph is a screenshot from the movie. I pretty much just stumbled across this type by chance when I was researching street photography. I really enjoyed it because I already have a background in filmmaking and cinematography, which helps with the style. Cinematic street photography varies from traditional street photography, in that it has much more editing done to it. Normally, street photographs have very minimum editing done, apart from making them black and white. The other main characteristic of cinematic street photography is that it has very strong subjects. This already fits in with my personal preference, however. I don't really like photographs that are just download lines, have no clear subject for the eye to focus on. For example, in this photograph, the yellow altar that contrasts with the blue lighting in the church provides a nice place for the eye to focus on. I took this photo in a church in Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil. The whole church is like this. All the ceilings being through glass, which made for a very pretty scene. Getting the lighting right was really hard, and most of my photographs in this area were underexposed. But it shows my cinematic street photography phase well. The last phase I went through stylistically was travel photography, which I'm still doing to the present. I switched to this style when I started seriously thinking about colleges the next year, and I realized that I wanted to keep living abroad and traveling too, and this affected my photography. For me, travel photography is more about showing the mood and particular feeling of a place. It's similar to street photography, in that with both styles, I'm just trying to show the beauty of ordinary life. For example, I took this photo when I went to a town called Budapest recently with my district Zoetet, where I read foreign exchange students. In the middle of the city, there is a beautiful park with lots of amazing waterfalls, and there is one bridge with rocks on it, like Ponte Sam. It was just so random to find a bridge like this in the middle of nowhere in Brazil, and for Budapest was a very inspiring place to shoot. Other inspiration came from my interviews. I interviewed 2 Brazilian street photographers by email in Portuguese, Daniela Corso and Rodrigo Vieira. Daniela was very nice. She took a lot of interest in my project and my own photographs while also encouraging me. She was very helpful and provided lots of good advice on photography. The second photographer was Rodrigo Vieira. He some of the difficulties of being a photographer in a country like Brazil, the challenges of photography, especially street photography. The picture in the top left is by Daniela. She was done photo shoot from the favelas of Brazil. This photograph is from a vacation of Leptospira. Elephant is like a very large party with drugs and alcohol, with hypersexualization of women, often end in gang violence or fights between police and guerrilla gangs. If anyone's ever seen Put Up by June Leach, which is the Brit-playing movie that does a good job of showing the Elephant. Unfortunately, the Elephant scene can be romanticized by foreigners. But Daniela's work provides a lot of inspiration for me and photographs as both an attachment. These two photographs have influenced my style as well. Besides my interviews, my style also changed independently throughout the year in three new things. Pure street photography in the beginning of the year due to my work, my senior paper. Then cinematic street photography to street photography in the style of cinematography. And finally, travel photography inspired by the trips I took with Rotary or my host on places like Huertas or Bambin. These style changes have been shown in my blog posts from the whole year. Creating a blog post is a lot of work with 4 main steps: shooting, editing, writing, and translating. Shooting involves setting up photo shoots and then taking the actual photos. Editing means selecting the photos and then editing them in print, which can be a very long process. Writing and translating is writing the first draft of a post and then translating it and then proofreading the whole thing. In conclusion, I'm really happy with the way my senior thesis project worked with my exchange program, especially the inspiration for photography that came from living in a foreign country. I have some pretty fantastic stories from this place. Everything from swimming in the ocean in the middle of the night with students to jumping off dangerous high up. One of my favorite stories is from November around Thanksgiving. I was on a trip with Rotary, all of the other exchange students in my district, around 50 of us. We were doing a tour of Brazil, going to places like the Amazon, the Capitol, and the Northeast. We were in Jericoacoara, which is a small beach in the northeast of Brazil in the state of Ceará, for Thanksgiving. On Thanksgiving Day itself, I just actually ate shawarma for dinner. But then later that night, I met an American man in the middle of Brazil who was traveling for work, working as a trafficker. It was really nice to be around another American and woman for that Thanksgiving. And then the next day, me and Smith exchanged food. So I'd take a Thanksgiving dinner of my own, but it just ended up being turkey and chocolate cake. It was good enough for us. So living in Brazil has been a pretty awesome and unforgettable experience. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I can now take any questions.
Do they need to go up to...
So, if you ask a question, speak and articulate very clearly, and this microphone should pick you up. If it doesn't, I'll repeat the question to Lise. So, questions for Lise. Yes, Matthias.
Was there ever a moment when you did not have your normal camera and you used your phone to capture the situation?
I got it. Yeah, they were like, when I shot Carnival, I just switched host families from my third host family, and I didn't realize that I actually left my camera at my second host family's house. So I couldn't go to get it until after Carnival. I ended up shooting the largest and most famous event in Brazil with my really bad Samsung film camera. It was a huge disappointment and I'm still out of the house. Any other questions?
Question.
Yeah, good question.
What other questions do you guys have?
Yes, Elizabeth.
Was there any danger of lugging around your DSLR camera? Since not a lot of people in the country had one, I guess. I don't know. I feel like I don't like taking my DSLR camera to public events just because of one, how big it is, and two, it's kind of expensive. So it's if it breaks. Did you catch that?
I did.
Okay.
I got it. In my own town of Santa Cruz, there's not much danger because it's a really small town. But when I went to Fortaleza, which is the 12th most dangerous city in the world by citizens, I was really scared to bring my camera out of the hotel room.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, time for one more question. Yes, Sana.
All right, Lise. Were there days when you were taking photography and you look back on the pictures and you were like, this just does not work?
Oh yeah, all the time. I had a lot of problem in the beginning shooting in my town because it's small and it's not very inspiring. We have maybe 3 churches that were really pretty that I got used to shooting at, but after a while there's just no inspiration left. And it was a hard part.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Lise.